Good evening, dear friends. Welcome to lesson 2 of our new course, Jewpernatural. And it's only a 4-week course, so the newness of it wears off very quickly. Okay, but here we go. Lesson 2. Let us begin by dedicating tonight's class in loving memory of Mrs. Bernice Trogan by Joel and Barbara Lee, by Danny and Lisa Klein. And tonight's topic is, we're getting more wacky over here. We're only getting more wacky, not less. Okay. We're moving into the stars and the signs. Okay, so in the 1980s, for many of you remember this, there was a controversy that one of the staffers within the circle of then President Ronald Reagan leaked to the press or somehow got out that Nancy Reagan seeks guidance and counsel from astrologers, and then uses the information that she learns from them to advise her husband. And America told what's going on over here? Like, the president of the free world, the most powerful man is busy making decisions based on this mishigas. Okay, so let's try to figure it out over here. What's going on over here? Now, it's an interesting topic because on the one hand, it's pretty niche. And dreams is everybody has dreams. This is like weird beliefs. The interesting thing is that it's really had a rebirth, especially amongst younger people. And the year that it's been given is 2020. COVID somehow sparked a tremendous interest. Hello, Max. Good evening. 2020 has sparked everybody learned from Max. There's food, take some food, and you won't regret it. Maybe tomorrow you'll regret it. Tonight you for sure won't regret it. All right, blueberry muffins. They're really good. They're really good. I'm biased, but they're really good. Okay, they are good. There you go. Okay. They're not gluten-free. They're not, but they got blueberries. It's like a salad. It's not. Yes. It's got a lot of blueberries. It's like the ratio, right? It's like a. Okay, no, don't worry. No pressure if you don't staying off carbs or gluten-free or none of that stuff. Okay, don't worry. No pressure to eat the food. Only a little bit, but not a lot. Okay. So astrology. People are into these days. There's the zodiacs, there's horoscopes, and today it became very popular. There's like Instagram accounts that are dedicated to astrology, the daily astrology. What's your horoscope? There's influencers, there's Instagram over the stuff. It's big. It became very in vogue again. And we want to kind of get a good Jewish perspective, because this is something which there hasn't been a single era or single civilization that has not been pretty heavy in this stuff. Astrology was very, very big. Empires would predict the future and look at their lucks and when should we go to war. It was all around astrology. In a certain sense, you could say, before the modern age, we humans have a need. We humans have a need to try to understand the world around us, understand what's happening, try to understand the future. Today, what has filled that human need, a lot of it is science, a lot of it is psychology, and even like the world genetics. Like we try understanding the way things work. In the ancient world, and even in the not so ancient world, what filled that human need was astrology. That was basically the science of those days. So, but interestingly, with all the advancements in science, astrology still holds its appeal on some level. Now, what is astrology? So first of all, I should make a mention, just make sure they're all on the same page. Difference between astrology and astronomy. What's the difference? I used to not know the difference because I couldn't care less. I don't know. It's like, like the famous line goes, what's the difference between apathy and indifference? Oh, I don't care. I don't know, and I don't care. What's the difference? I don't know. Astrology, astronomy. Makes no difference to me anyways. All right, this is a little bit of an edgy joke. You ready for a little bit of an edgy joke? Hope you heard this one from me. I don't say it often, but with you over here, hopefully no one's gonna get me in trouble over this one. Okay. There's a young Chinese businessman. He's coming to America for the first time ever. to do business in America. He's young, he's naive, he's seeing the Western world for the first time, and he's having a meeting with a Jew in Manhattan. They meet up in a coffee shop. This is one of his first times really interacting with Americans. And the Jew introduces himself. His name is Mr. Goldberg. So this Chinese guy says, Goldberg. I recognize Goldberg. You were the ones that took down Titanic, no? That was an iceberg. Goldberg, what are you saying? So the Chinese guy, iceberg, Goldberg sounds the same. It's all the same thing to me. So the Jew says, 1 second. You're Chinese? Weren't you the ones that messed around with us Americans at Pearl Harbor? She says, no, that wasn't us. That was the Japanese. She says, Chinese, Japanese, all the same thing. Hello, okay, yeah, come on in. You ended up in the wrong meeting? Oh no. Okay. All right, Bayern, don't worry. You didn't miss any of the important stuff yet. Only the punchline. Okay. All right. So, astrology, astronomy, all the same thing. This is the basic idea. Astronomy is actually a field of science, which means we are observing the universe. Today, we do a lot of astronomy. Astronomy is the study of the heavenly bodies, planets and stars, their movements, their relationships with each other, the orbits, all that stuff, which is basic understanding of our universe. Astrology is already something which is very much beyond science. There's no scientific backing, at least as of today, that supports in an empirical way the knowledge or the theory of astrology. And astrology basically is that the heavenly spheres, the stars and the planets, have an influence on us here on planet Earth. And they could affect what is happening here on Earth. They could affect our chances for success, for wealth, for luck, for love, for anything. And if you could only know how to tap into the right energy that is right now dominating in the sky, you could get the stars aligned to make things work well for you. So says astrology. So like today, you go on an app and you could read your horoscope and you could read today's astrology and they'll say, today's a great day to go out and find love. And they're like, oh, young people, that sounds so beautiful. You go find love today. It's like a cute, fuzzy thing. And then people even go and pay the big bucks to have a meeting and get counseling from astrologers who could tell you, help hack the secret to success in life. And people make big money on that stuff as well. I've also read that astrologers said we're making a lot of money recently. We're able to monetize our specialty. So a lot of people are fascinated by this, and they're like, I don't know, it seems pretty legit, or why not? Nothing to lose. And a lot of people are saying, come on, this is baloney. There's no science behind it. It's just people making stuff up. It makes no sense. But it's a very old phenomenon. And what we want to do is understand, what does Judaism say about it? Now, I'm going to say the obvious. I told this to you last week. I want to say the obvious. If Judaism's perspective on astrology was the whole thing is baloney, it's made up, it's stupid, move on with life. If that was Judaism's perspective, we wouldn't be here tonight. It's a little bit more nuanced. On the other hand, Judaism is not either jumping behind every single mishagas that pops up in the 21st century. We all understand that as well. So it's a very ancient belief. It's a very ancient area of knowledge, of expertise. And we need to understand what is Judaism's position on it and what it means for us today, especially where there's a world that is starting to reincorporate these types of ideas and beliefs and areas of knowledge. I don't want to call it a science. What's just, I guess, a field of knowledge. So this is what we're going to do tonight. We're going to begin with a video. The video is going to give us a very basic idea of astrology. The idea there's the zodiacs, the zodiac belt. There's 12 clusters of stars that comprise the zodiac. And then the video is going to give us a very basic overview of Jewish astrology, which does not match, very important note, very important. Jewish astrology does not match Western astrology. So even if you hear the same words, astrology, don't think that automatically that it's all the same thing. But Judaism does have its own astrology. We're going to get a basic overview about it in the video, and we'll continue after that. All right? So here we go for a little video for tonight.
What is Judaism's position on astrology? To answer that, a little intro is in order. Astrology is the belief that each celestial item that makes up the furniture of our skies has a direct influence in one way or another on planet Earth and its human population. Now, there's a lot going on up there, but as far as astrology is concerned, we can group it all into two categories. Of all the countless stars, astrologers are fascinated by 12 specific clusters or constellations. If we draw imaginary lines in the sky, like a child drawing dot to dot, these clusters turn into simplified images. Why are these clusters meaningful to astrologers? Because they belong to a region of the sky that is directly in the path that the sun takes during the course of a year. If we imagine the sun to be a giant pointer, it draws attention to a different constellation each month. So nature itself appears to highlight the importance of specific clusters at specific times. Astrology refers to the constellations as zodiac signs, and the region of sky they occupy as the zodiac belt. Beside the stars, which occupy fixed positions, there are also celestial bodies that move through our skies and are said to wield influence. 7 of them are close or bright enough to be visible to the human eye, and were therefore known to the ancients, who treated them as a complete set. Now, the exact positions of the constellations and planets is highly significant to astrology in at least 3 ways. 1. Birth. This is a one-time calculation. The astrological reading at the moment of your birth says a lot about your personality and life. 2. Events. This is a relationship between the stars and planets and large-scale events on planet Earth. Wars, wealth, tsunamis, famines. 3. Activity. This is a way to determine which activities are likely to be successful based on their timing. Certain astrological signs suggest that beginning a specific activity at that time is highly advisable, while to begin other specific actions would be disastrous. So, where does Judaism stand on all this? Well, for a start, Judaism insists that God directs the world. The stars and planets do not. Does that belief sabotage astrology? A look inside Judaism's classic sources reveals conflicting opinions. Some, like the famous Maimonides, insist that the stars and planets are perfect for configuring a precise calendar, but nothing more. Others argue that God created these features of our universe to serve as useful tools. They do have an influence on us to an extent directed by God. Several classic Jewish sources deal with astrology, but today we'll take a look at the Talmud. The Talmudic sages used the Hebrew term mazalot, which means flow or travel, because the planets journey through our skies. And they discussed 3 astrological time periods: hours, days, and months. The monthly mazalot are the zodiac signs that alternate on a monthly basis. But here's a catch. Jewish months are lunar-based and fit a unique Torah system of astronomical calculations. So don't expect the monthly mazalot to perfectly match the common zodiac system. But the monthly zodiacs are very rarely mentioned in the Talmud, so the rabbis couldn't have considered them overly important. Instead, they paid close attention to the hourly mazalot. How do those work? Divide each day into 12 equal hours and each night into another 12. Each hour of the day and night is influenced by another of the big 7. Begin with the first hour of Saturday night. Put Mercury in that slot. For the second hour, add the moon. The third hour belongs to Saturn, then Jupiter, Mars, the sun, and the 7th hour is Venus. For the 8th hour, begin the pattern again. In goes Mercury. And we keep up the same pattern all week long. It fits perfectly, so we always start again with Mercury at the first hour of Saturday night. Now, in addition to the planets rotating their rule on an hourly basis, there is also the concept of daily mazalot. For this, we must view the day and the night as 2 distinct units of time. We then identify one dominant mazel for the 12 daytime hours, and another dominant mazel for the 12 night hours. Let's take Tuesday as an example. Which planet dominates the first hour of the day? That would be Mars. So Mars is the major player for that entire 12-hour period, while the others are minor players. But when night falls on Tuesday, Mars steps down from its throne. Which planet takes its place? Saturn sits at the first hour of each Tuesday night. So Saturn becomes the primary influencer throughout that night. That's how the daily mazalot works. But as mentioned earlier, the Talmudic sages focused mainly on the hourly mazalot. For example, if you wanted to discover something about your natural personality, you would identify the precise hour of your birth and take note of its dominant mazal, which lends a whole new meaning to our responding to a birth with Mazel Tov.
That was quite wacky, you know? All right, let's unpack this a little bit. Well, the first big piece of news over here is that Judaism, in the most classical Jewish texts, astrology is a thing. Is a thing. It's a thing. How big of a thing? How significant is it? What difference does it make in our life? Practically, should we start seeking out the people to tell us the zodiac? We're going to get to that. But the basic idea that astrology is a thing in Judaism is a thing. Okay, so let's just take a quick look over here. Take a look on page 46. Page 46 gives you a little bit of an overview over here. The main system in Judaism, interestingly, is not the monthly zodiacs, which is what 21st century Western world is very excited about. Judaism is all about the hourly, we call it the mazal. That's the Hebrew word I'm going to be using right now, which means mazel means the flow. Mazel tov does not mean congratulations. Mazel means you should have a good mazel, a good flow from above, which is very interesting. I'll get to that in a moment. But the idea is Judaism does believe that one of the ways how sustenance flows down to our world, the same way, very simply, there's rain, the same way there's weather patterns, the same way the sun causes plants to grow and affects the currents in the ocean, and the moon has an effect on the tides of water, etc., etc. Judaism believes one of the ways how a certain influence or flow affects our world flows through the heavenly bodies. So the stars and the planets actually have an effect and change the energy that's flowing down on this day and on this specific hour. Practically speaking, what does it mean? We'll get to that. So here's the idea. Every day has a mazel, which is basically defined by one planet, that planet has the strongest influence on that day, as well as every single hour, as we saw in the videos. Take a look over here. It starts Saturday night. If you look here on page 46, it begins Saturday night, and we just go through this rotation. Now, all of these things, all of these flows from above, spiritual flows, right? They're a little bit on a more spiritual level. These flows are both helpful to indicate they affect the person when you are born. Whatever mazel you were born on, which means the hour that you were born on, that mazel defines a little bit who you are, your personality, your strengths, and your weaknesses. Yes.
Clock or watch, or a computer, how do you know what time it is?
You don't have to know this. This is the fact. The fact is that every hour has a mazel that is defining that if they are the central influence on this hour. I'll tell you right now, I have no clue what mazel I was born on. I could probably figure it out, but I just never did it. We'll get to that in a moment. Which means even though this concept exists, we're going to see it soon. Okay, spoiler alert. Judaism is not very into actually dabbling into this on a practical level. But this is the idea, theoretically. I don't know what mazel I was born on, okay? And I've learned about this when I was 13. My first year studying Talmud in Yeshiva, we were studying the tractate Shabbos. And the place in the Talmud where the Talmud really discusses this whole concept of astrology is in tractate Shabbos. And I was at 13 years old. I was fascinated. I like never forget the the experience of learning through this entire discussion over here. And I've never taught it. This is the first time I'm ever having a chance to teach it because, it's a little bit of a interesting niche area of Judaism. But in any case, so it affects who you are based on when you were born. It also affects the energy in the present moment. And there's even an idea, which is a little bit less present in Judaism, but in historical astrology, the idea of being able to predict the future. The stars themselves give you insight into the future. And there was a big thing back in the day called stargazing. It was a big profession. People were able to look in the sky and predict the future. And I'll tell you something interesting. I was thinking about this past summer. This past summer, my family was up north in Michigan for 3 weeks while we had the Israel course. Mushki was helping direct the teen camp. So I was shuttling up and down a lot. And one night I was walking with my little Mendel. So how old was he then? He was 5, right? He's 6 now. So he was 5. And I said, what? It's such a beautiful sky. It's such a beautiful night. You could see all the stars. He's like, stars are really just dots. They don't have points to them. And I'm like, how sad is it that a 5-year-old boy, who's, thank God, very intelligent, he's not out of touch. The first time that he's noticing what a star looks like in real life is when we're up north in Michigan. It's like, wow, that's what a star looks like. So it's an interesting thing that today, in general, we're very out of touch with the world above us. We're looking down at our phones. We're so busy. There's so much going on. Back in the day, people were very bored. And back in the day, people had time to think. There were no distractions. And the sky was a very big area. If you were a smart person, you spent a lot of time simply looking up. And you started recognizing the patterns of the skies. So today, we're just so foreign to the whole idea. But back in the day, it was a very real thing. People spent time studying and understanding what is happening above. So there's even the idea of predicting the future. But let's get back on point. Let's put this point. The main idea that Judaism speaks about in the Talmud is that the hour that you were born on, the mazel of your hour, defines your destiny. Tells you what life's going to be like. It tells you a little bit what your personality is going to be like. And this is a very big oversimplification on page 47. If you're born in the mazel of the sun, you will have a lustrous appearance. I don't know. Okay, there's a lot more details in the Talmud, but let's just keep with this. Lustrous appearance. If you were born under the mazel of the moon, suffering afflictions. There'll be highs and lows to life. The same way the moon is always waxing and waning, and there's ups and downs, so too life is going to be a little bit rocky. Mercury, you'll have radiance and wisdom. Venus, wealth and promiscuity. Mars, spiller of blood. See, that's it. All the mass murderers, they belong to Mars. Okay. Who said men come from Mars, huh? All right, let's take that back. Okay, Jupiter represents righteousness, and Saturn is plans will come to naught. That's sad, right? But the Talmud says, so the people born under Saturn, their lives are doomed. Everything is going to come to naught. So the Talmud said, we didn't say whose plans. Somebody's plans are going to come to naught, either yours or either your enemies. So there's a lot of options over there, a very large spectrum of what the reality is going to look like over here. In any case, this is the basic idea that we have over here. Judaism speaks about astrology. So we have this basic nugget over here, which some people may find a lot of comfort in. Some people are going to be a little bit weirded out by this. What? Judaism is getting behind this craziness? Okay, but this is what it says. But then let's go a little bit further. There's a story in the Torah. We're all familiar with it. And this story is driven by astrology. And the Torah, the Bible, seems to give in general. The Torah, there's many, many stories and accounts in the Torah that are very strongly connected with astrology. Here's one example. Let's take a look on page 48. Text 1a, and let us start going around doing some readings. I think the last time I started on my right side. Did I start on my right side last time? So I'll do the left. Sumerian, text 1a, page 48. Let's start reading.
Pharaoh gave an order to all his people. Every boy that is born must be cast into the Nile, but let every girl live.
We all know the story of the slavery of the Jewish people in Egypt. One day Pharaoh wakes up and gives an order, every boy that is born, throw into the Nile. Now, if you read critically, simply speaking, you read this verse, it sounds just like another, this is what anti-Semites like doing. They're never happy with whatever oppression and torture they've been giving to the Jews yesterday, so they find a new thing to do. So Pharaoh woke up, he says, okay, today all boys will be thrown into the Nile. But if you look at this verse critically, he says he gave an order to all his people. Every boy that is born must be cast into the Nile, which seems to imply this is not only against Jews. He's going after all boys. He looked in the records of Egypt, no boys are recorded in the state registry that day. Only girls were born that day. Okay. It's this interesting thing. Why is Pharaoh going after every boy? So Rashi, the number one classic commentator of the Torah, right away jumps in and fills in the narrative. Want to read, Susan?
Sure.
Text 1b, page 49.
The astrologer's warning. Pharaoh made this decree on his own people as well. He did so because on the day Moses was born, his astrologers told him, the savior of the Jewish people was born today, but we don't know if this person is a Jew or an Egyptian. We do see, however, that his eventual downfall will be through water. Pharaoh therefore made a decree that very day against all newborn boys, including the Egyptians.
What's happening over here? Pharaoh had on staff stargazers, and they would help help him predict the future. The stargazers say, we see that the savior of the Jewish people is being born today, and the way to get rid of him is through water. This is why. This is where the whole thing comes from. So Pharaoh says, okay, every boy being born today, straight in the water. Easy. Okay. What happens? First of all, the astrologers were correct. Moses was born that day. We'll get to it soon. His downfall was through water. So the Torah is definitely giving credibility, putting a lot of weight behind the art, the knowledge of stargazing and astrology. The idea they could look up and what happens above has an effect on us and is even guiding us. Judaism very much seems to support it as a phenomenon, as a reality. Okay, it's the story. Now, what happens is, of course, that Moses' sister and mother see what's happening. And they could tell, they were smart. They saw that Pharaoh was onto something. And they saw that they have this, something is pushing them to throw every single boy in the water. So they made a basket and put baby Moshe in the basket, let him flow in the Nile. And the stargazers came running back to Pharaoh saying, oh, we just saw that the savior of the Jewish people is in the water. And Pharaoh said, okay, mission successful, mission aborted. Everybody can now keep your baby boys. Meanwhile, Moses was safe and sound. And he was rescued by Pharaoh's own daughter, Batia. And he was raised in Pharaoh's own palace. That's the irony of the whole story. Okay. But this is the story. And if you look on page 50, there's multiple examples over here, which I don't want to go into right now. We are in Jewish tradition, the most classical source of Jewish tradition. We see that astrology plays a role. I'm going to get back to some of these maybe soon in today's class. So the idea that I want to establish with you over here is that astrology is something that if you look in Judaism, in traditional and the most accepted, the most central Jewish text, astrology is definitely taken as something which is a reality, which means simply that humans at one point, most Jewish sources say that this is a lost art today. But back in the day, there was a certain knowledge, there was a certain, again, there was a field of knowledge, some people understood it and knew it, of how you could understand astrology, what's happening in the sky, the zodiacs, the mazalot, the constellations, the planets, and you could even predict the future with it. And it was a real legitimate field of study. It was an expertise. Now, the question today is if the modern day astrologers are just doing pseudo astrology, or is it actually the authentic, ancient wisdom of astrology? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, but that's a question. If today is even at that level, or is today really just one big bogus? Okay, but in any case. But at the same time, as much as we do see, by the way, I'm just wondering, okay, this is a very advanced question. I don't know if any of you are going to know this. Do you know of anywhere in Jewish tradition where astrology actually touches a little bit? Actual Jewish practice, meaning not just in the world of theory, in the world of ideas, but where this idea of the mazel actually affects Jewish law, where we do take it into consideration. Do you know, by any chance? You know, Max? There's a law in Judaism. It's in the Code of Jewish Law, that in the 7th hour after midday on Friday is the mazal of Mars. And it's a bad hour to make kiddush on red wine. So Jewish law says that there's a time, there's an hour where you should either make the kiddush on Friday night before that hour or after that hour, but better not to do it on that hour. Jewish law says if you have guests coming over, then you're allowed to still do it then. If you need to use white wine, and you could even use red wine. If you're having guests, and then there's a mitzvah of hosting people, okay, then there's no problem. There's also the idea that Jewish law also says you should make kiddush as soon as you come back from synagogue. You go to shul on Friday night, you're not supposed to wait in between coming back from shul and making kiddush. You're supposed to make kiddush right away. So Jewish law says, okay, also if you come back in that hour, make kiddush right away. So it's not that strong of an idea, but it's an idea. Now, I wanted to mention hour clocks, that there's 12 o'clock midnight, and every single hour is exactly 60 minutes, and then there's 12 o'clock midday. When we speak about hours in Jewish law, we are not talking about our time, which is very arbitrary. Jewish time, ready for some Jewish time? See, this is why, you see, you know about it, you see? There's something called Chabad time. You're familiar with Chabad time? Everything always starts a little bit late. Growing up, I grew up with a guy that he had Jewish blood. One of his parents were from Germany, a Yekka Jew. And then his other parents were from where? Where were they always late? The Yekkas were always very punctual. I don't know, who were the ones who were always late? The Hungarians? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So he said, so what happens when a Yekka and a Hungarische, when they breed together? You know what happens to their kids? They show up exactly 10 minutes late. Very punctually, 10 minutes late. Okay, in any case, there's an idea, Chabad time is always not really on time, whatever. Show up when we tell you to come, but now you know why. Jewish time doesn't add up with, okay, this is, I'm just joking. This is the real thing. If you want to know, there's something called the halachic time. Halachic time. Halachic time is 12 day hours, 12 night hours. How do you calculate it? You start from sunrise, it ends at sunset. Take all those minutes and divide them equally in 12. Whatever that number is, that's the hour. That hour could be as short as, I'm not sure exactly offhand, but it could be 50 minutes, maybe even 40 something minutes on a winter's day. Or it could be 70 something minutes on a summer's day, depending on the daylight hours. How many daylight? Same thing for night. So the halachic hours are hard to calculate. If you go on any, it's called the zmanim, the times for Jewish law. And it's important for Jewish law to know specific times. So for example, today, I'm going to go right now on chabad.org/zmanim. You want to find out what today's halachic hour is? Let's put it up over here. Okay. Chabad for Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Dawn was 4:30 a.m. The earliest time you could put on your talis or tefillin was 5:18 a.m. because that is the time when the sun did not rise yet, but the physical eye could start recognizing certain things. There's enough light to recognize. Sunrise was 6:17. And the sha'azmanit, the proportional hour, means the halachic hour of today, was 72 minutes and 56 seconds. And it's going to get longer, no? Are we going longer or shorter? We're still getting longer. We still got a few weeks till we get June 21st, right? So it's always the 21st, right? Also December 21st, right? So this is the idea. So When we say that there's one mazel, one planet, that's the mazel of an hour, it's the Jewish hour. So you have to start making all these, so it's a little bit hard to figure out if you want to figure out what your mazel was when you were born. But in any case, so there's an hour where you shouldn't make Kiddush on Friday night. Now, for this specific law, it would change every single Friday night because the proportional hours changing week to week, and the time of when that hour is happening could also change. It fluxes earlier. So for this law, you take the average of the year. You take the median of the year. What is the median? Basically, I think I think you take December 21st when it's sort of average, and it's basically exactly 60 minutes right then. And that becomes the hour that you keep week to week. So here in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, that hour when we're on daylight saving times is from 7:36 to 8:36. So ideally, you shouldn't make Kiddush when red wine because of the mazel. I don't understand the logic of it and why red wine is a problem, but there's this idea that what we do down here, there's an influence from above, and some things are maybe not the right thing. There's an idea in Jewish law that a woman should not induce unless it is absolutely necessary. You don't induce a baby. It's like, somebody says like, oh, we planned a party, we want to have the bris on this day, so let's just induce the baby today. Like today, people do these crazy stuff. Jewish law says don't do it. If a doctor tells you they need to do it, you do it. You listen to doctors. But ideally, you shouldn't induce. And there's many reasons for that. Number one, you don't put a woman in danger voluntarily. According to Jewish law, a woman going into labor is considered a life-threatening situation. When it's an act of God, which means God is bringing it upon you, then that's God's business. But for you to induce, Jewish law says, let God take care of this type of stuff. But another little footnote in Judaism is Judaism says God gets to choose what mazel this baby is going to be born in. And you inducing is starting to mix into God's business. The baby is not going to be born in the mazel that is destined for this. So it's a very interesting thing that it's not very overt, but if you study enough, you look around, there's a lot of little dabblings of what we call this idea of astrology influencing Judaism. Okay, but dear friends, I'm already getting a little bit off topic. Let's get to today's point. Dear friends, this is what I want to do with you. We're on topic, but we're getting a little bit. As much as Judaism gives weight to the concept of astrology, there's also something very interesting. What is the Jewish word? Any of you know what is a Jewish word that is used all throughout the Talmud, all throughout Jewish literature, whenever we speak about idolaters, the pagan society around the Jews? Anybody know what the Hebrew word that is used? Just wondering. Don't worry if you don't know it. This is an advanced question. The word is akum. I'll put this up over here. Akum. Ayin kaf vav mem. Akum. Akum is an abbreviation. It stands for these three words: Ovdei, Kochavim, Umazalot, which means worshipers of stars and celestial bodies. This is literally the word. If you want to say idolater in Jewish, this is how you say it. Ovdei, Kochavim, Umazalot. Akum in short. Akum in shorthand. Which means, as much as Judaism does give some credibility to the concept of astrology and the reality of astrology, and that actually the heavenly bodies do have some influence and have an effect on us humans down here on earth, this is also where we have that red line.
Well, I was just saying, I can see that because it's one thing to understand it and whatever, but it's another thing to throw your beliefs in it.
Right. 100%. Exactly. So you start hearing that this actually has influence on you, and you could start jumping into it a little bit too much where it starts compromising your belief. Right. So there's obviously a very, very nuanced understanding in Judaism, a very nuanced belief system when it comes to this. And that's what I want to explore with you tonight. For the rest of today's class, I want to focus on two questions with you. Number one, what is Judaism's understanding of astrology? Which means simply, what does Judaism believe in? What does Judaism not believe in? What power does Judaism ascribe to astrology and what not? Let's just simply get a proper, may I even say sophisticated understanding of the Jewish position on astrology. And then we're going to get to what is Judaism's belief of astrology, which means very practical. What place should astrology hold for us as a Jew? Is astrology something that we say, oh, it's Jewish, let's just jump right into it? I mean, practically, the first question is more, I guess, on an intellectual level, at a more theoretical level. What is the idea? Practically, what place does astrology have in our life? That's going to be the second question. Dear friends, let us begin. We have astrology. Astrology determines who you are, what your nature is, whether you can be wealthy, whether you can be successful, whether you can be promiscuous, whether you can be a murderer, right? Unbelievable stuff over here. Okay. It could even predict the future. Comes along Maimonides and say, I have a very big problem. Maimonides says, you're jumping into astrology? You got some big problems over here. Let's read. Linda, you want to read? Text 2, the Great Maimonides, page 55. Text 2, page 55.
Do not entertain the thesis held by foolish people that God decrees at the time of a person's creation, whether he or she will be righteous or wicked. If God were to decree that an individual will be righteous or wicked, or that there will be an insurmountable inborn quality that compels a person to a particular path of behavior, way of thinking, attributes, or deeds, as the foolish proponents of astrology imagine, how could he command us, do this, do not do this, improve your behavior, or do not follow after your wickedness? According to their mistaken perception, it has already been decreed or predetermined by the person's insurmountable nature that he or she must act in a certain way. In addition, were this to be true, what room would there be for the entire Torah? By what standard of justice would retribution be administered to the wicked or reward granted to the righteous? Shall the judge of the entire world not act justly?
Maimonides says astrology is very scary business because we are right now hitting the corner of some very, very key Jewish beliefs. Maimonides in general was a defender of key Jewish beliefs. And you don't mess with Maimonides. In general, Maimonides was, maybe we'll do it one day. If you read some of Maimonides' letters, not his Torah writings, but like his personal letters, you see he was a mad character. You don't mess with him. He was very sure of himself. He had a very healthy self-esteem. And I mean that in a good way. You know, like the famous joke, the guy says, I'm great, I'm good looking, I'm this, I'm that. My greatest attribute is I'm very, very humble. Maimonides was, he had a very, he knew how to take a stand for what. If you dared mess with Jewish cardinal beliefs, you just went on Maimonides' bad side. Okay. So Maimonides sees people all into astrology. He says, you guys got this wrong over here. The wrong way of seeing astrology it's not just weird, it's dangerous. These are dangerous beliefs. Now, why? Number one, the number one premise of Judaism on the most practical level is that man has free choice. We are fully responsible, accountable, and in control of our behaviors. There's no such thing as saying, this is just genetics. I've actually read this once. A lawyer tried bringing to the court of law, somewhere in America, the argument that genetics compelled this person to commit this crime, and therefore the court of law cannot hold them accountable. And it was a whole debate if genetics actually has a role to play in the judge's determination. According to Judaism, it has no place. Free choice is a full real thing. Comes along astrology and says, no, if you're going to be a bloodletter, if you're going to be a spiller of blood, a shedder of blood, that was determined by the mazel that you were born with. If you're going to be this, if you have good luck, bad luck, you're going to be a shlemazel. By the way, in the word shlemazel is the word mazel, which seems to blame the shlemazelkeit on. There's three types of people. This is a Jewish joke. Something called the shlemazel. There's something called the shlemiel. There's something called the nudnik. What's the difference? The shlemazel is the one who pours the soup, spills the soup. The shlemiel is the one who the soup gets spilled on. I was like, people have a mazel. The soup always spills on me. The nudnik is the one who asks, what type of soup was it? Unbelievable categorization over here of people. Okay. What's the idea? Maimonides says, we've got a big problem over here. Astrology comes and says, we know who you're going to be. Who's all you're born in that hours. Now we know. That really goes against the whole concept of free choice. Even more than that, Maimonides says, if you're going to tell me that everything is written in the stars, everything's already kind of there, there's a destiny, there's a fate, it's all predetermined, that also goes against Judaism. We are very big believers that God is in control. God responds to reality on earth. One of the basic comforts that we humans need to know is that there's a judge in this world. Yesh din veyesh dayan. There is a judge and there's justice in this earth. God rewards those who do good. God punishes those who do bad. We believe this. We believe that through prayer we could change. God could give us blessings. We show up in Rosh Hashanah, we ask God for blessings. Give us a good year, give us health, give us wealth, give us success, give us nachas. But astrology comes and says, it's all there in the stars. it's all written already. My body says, I don't like what I'm hearing over here. You're going up against big Jewish stuff. And this is where we start seeing the need, a certain tension within Judaism to have a proper and healthy, balanced understanding of astrology. And this is where we get to the idea that in Judaism is something called astrology light. What's astrology light? It's astrology, but tone it down a bit. Just like you buy, you could buy a beer, then there's a lighter version of the beer. Judaism has a much lighter version of astrology. What is the lighter version of astrology? Let's begin with the first problem. There's a few points here I want to go through. Point number one, when we speak about astrology, is like this. Let's read text 4. And I don't want to get into it now. I just want to point it out to you. Very interesting where this text comes from. We don't have many Jewish writings, scholarly writings from pre-10th century. Like the 11th century, really 12th century is the dawn of a lot of the output of scholars writing, and that we still have those texts. This is a very, very early writing, which gives us a very authentic and early understanding of the Torah position of astrology from Rabbi Shiri Ragon, those of you who joined last course, from the Gaonic period. Al, give us a read. Text 4, page 57.
Regarding astrological predictions concerning promiscuity, death, and the like, the celestial bodies only generate an inclination and desire. Such people feel strong attraction to death or promiscuity, but they can restrain themselves and overcome their inclination. This is like the standard negative inclination that we all deal with. Sometimes it entices us strongly, but we can overpower it. Celestial bodies can only cause an attraction, increasing the strength of the negative inclination. God has given such people the requisite strength to overpower this inclination. People must struggle mightily to overcome their negative inclination. As a result of astrological circumstances, are granted greater reward by God for doing so than people who do not feel so strongly tempted. In summary, all that celestial bodies are able to determine, according to those who believe in their power, is the desire to be overcome.
Okay, so here we're getting a much more nuanced and balanced understanding. Astrology does not determine who you are and who you're going to be and what you're going to do. It doesn't predict your actions, but it does color your inclination. We all know there's something called a Yetzer Hara. Every person has what's called the evil inclination. We all have a good inclination, we all have a bad inclination. He used these words over here, Yetzer Hara. Your mazel and the negative parts of your mazel that you were born on does give you that variety, that shading of which type of Yetzer Hara you'll have. Some people, and we all know this, we all have different weaknesses. We're all different people. Some people have a weakness when it comes to theft. Some people, their weakness is promiscuity, and etc. Every single person. Some people get mad very easily. Every single person has their weakness that they have to deal with. Now, just because you have a weakness, that doesn't mean that you're not in control of yourself. It doesn't mean that you're automatically going to do this. We're not animals that our instincts are who we are. These are inner, this is what we have to deal with. So, he says very, very clearly, the astrology can merely tell you a little bit about your soul, your inclinations. In no ways it's saying you're gonna be like this, and in no ways it's saying that you have to do this. Period. The Talmud actually in a certain way says this exactly. We just learned that if you're born under the mazel of Mars, you're gonna be a spiller of blood. There's a sage. His name is Rav Ashi. We learned about him last week. Rav Ashi jumped up and said, I was born on the mazel of Mars. He knew what mazel he was born on. He says, I'm not a murderer. So Talmud says right away, no. We didn't say you're going to be a murderer. We said you're going to be a spiller of blood. You could be a spiller of blood in a criminal way. You could be a surgeon. You could be a mohel. Right? You could be a shochit, be a slaughterer. Now, some people go to medical school and they say, I want to be a surgeon. Some people say, you're crazy. The sight of blood makes me want to, I pass out just from the thought of it. So it just shows you, some people, they have a natural inclination to the idea that I want to help out society. I want to open up bodies and deal with stuff down there. It's an interesting idea, and God bless them. We need surgeons. So the Talmud itself says, it's not telling you to be a murderer. It's simply telling you this is a natural gravitation that you're going to have. Because you were born under the influence of this mazel. But are you going to be a good person or a bad person? That's fully in your hands. And a lot of these inclinations, a lot of these things that we'll look at as a negative, actually have a lot of very positive and productive and even holy outlets. Okay, so here we have the first nuance that really lessens the strength of astrology and Judaism. We're not predicting who you are. It is simply something that has an effect on your soul, that when you're born, this is part of your inclination. Let's put this up over here. Okay, when it comes to freedom of choice, the key idea over here is astrology does not determine your actions. It's only inclination. It's very, very not final. It's not a prediction. It's a little bit of an influence. Okay, that's the first idea for now. How are we doing? Doing good? Number 2. Let's read another text. This can be the next little caveat. The next thing that very much lessens the weight that astrology holds in Judaism. I'll tell you a little story. There was a great sage. His name was Rabbi Akiva. And we just celebrated his life yesterday. The holiday of Lag BaOmer celebrates 2 great sages. Rabbi Akiva and his student Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar. That's who we celebrate on Lag BaOmer. Rabbi Akiva had a daughter. And she was engaged, Mazel Tov. A non-Jew who was an astrologer walks over to Rabbi Akiva. People knew about Rabbi Akiva. He's a celebrity in town. He says, "You're Rabbi Akiva?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "I want to share with you something. I was stargazing the other night, and I saw it written in the stars that your daughter is going to die on her wedding day, on her wedding night." What do you do? What do you do? Cancel the wedding? Tell your daughter you're never getting married again? That's not fun news to hear. Let's read this in the Talmud. Text 5a, page 59. Anna, are we by you? Text 5a, page 59.
Rabbi Akiva had a daughter. Astrologer told him that she would be bitten by
A snake.
a snake of her wedding day and died. Rabbi Akiva was very worried about this. On the young lady's wedding day, she took the ornamental pin from her hair and stuck it in a hole of wall for safekeeping. When she did so, it lodged into the eye of snake, killing it. In the morning, when she pulled the pin out of the wall, the dead snake followed it, attacked the pin.
Keep on going. Next page, yeah.
Oh my God.
If it's, no, so should she continue? Yes, Alki, you continue. Okay, no problem, perfect.
Rabbi Akiva asked his daughter, "What did you do to merit this?" She told him, "In the afternoon, a pauper knocked on the door, but everyone was preoccupied with the wedding feast, and nobody heard it. I stood up, took my portion of food, and gave it to him." Rabbi Akiva said to her, "You performed the mitzvah, and you were safe in its merit." Rabbi Akiva went out and taught regarding this incident. Charity will save you from death.
Okay. It's an unbelievable story because Rabbi Akiva, and you just imagine how difficult it must have been. He hears this ominous news. Rabbi Akiva doesn't share it with anybody. Everybody's going to dance happily at the wedding, and he knows that this is a time bomb. And can you just imagine the scene that he says goodbye to his daughter that night? She's finally going. You know, the first night after the wedding, she's going with her groom, and he doesn't know if he's ever going to see her again. Is this the end of the line? The next morning, she's alive. The snake is killed, and he says, something had to happen here. We see that the astrologer was correct. He was onto it. There was a poisonous snake right there, ready to kill her. She said, "Well, I did a mitzvah yesterday. Somebody came knocking on the door for food. Everybody else was busy. I gave him my portion." Why is this an important story? This is a story that the Talmud brings down. If you take a look on page 59, this is from the Talmud Shabbat, page 156b. Page 156 is exactly where the Talmud discusses the whole subject of astrology in Judaism. And why does the Talmud bring the story down? It says, astrology is madrash, shmarology, whatever. It's not a big deal. Astrology does give certain predictions, but they're very not set in stone. It could easily change. Easily change. You are not bound by astrology and perhaps the opposite. You have the editorial power, right? You have veto power over the astrological predictions. And this is the conclusion of the Talmud in the whole issue of astrology. Let's read the next text, and Alki, you could read this one too. Text 5b from Rashi on this Talmud. This is how Rashi summarizes the message of this story. Text 5b.
Prayer and religious acts one's astrological destiny can be changed.
There you go. All it takes is some prayer, doing a good deed, a mitzvah, and you could change your mazel. If you had bad mazel, you could change it. So,
By free choice.
not by free choice, by merit.
Okay.
There's an idea that you have control over who you are, but then there's ideas you don't have control over. You're going to get killed by a poisonous snake.
What I meant was the free choice to give that person her.
Oh, that's a big part of it. Or the idea is that you don't even have free choice over yourself, over your choice. You even have free choice over your destiny. You have control over your destiny. Just because something is maybe in your deck of cards, you could easily amend it. And this is a very key Jewish belief, that even though there's astrology and maybe there are certain issues and certain challenges that are somewhat laid ahead of you on your road, on your journey in life, a single mitzvah can get rid of it. You have total veto power. God can get rid of things. It's not such a strong force. We are not bound by astrology. It's a force, but we're not bound by it. Okay, it's reminding me, talking about good mazel and bad mazel. There was once a Jew from Chelm. Are you familiar with the stereotype? Chelm is a town in Poland, a Jewish town. And it became a town that they gave it the stereotype that all the people there are very silly and foolish. So there's a Jew from Chelm that he won the lottery. And all the townspeople come to him. That's all we could do, huh? The power of suggestion. Okay. This Jew wins the lottery. So they ask him, how do you win the lottery? What's your trick? He says, it was a little bit of mazel, like a little bit of luck, and it was a little bit of seichel, and it was a little bit of brains. So a little bit of brains, a little bit of luck. They said, what was the luck, what was the brains? He said, I'll tell you. The brains was, and my mother once told me, that 7 is a lucky number. But the lottery runs by two digits. So I said, if 7 is a lucky number, then 7 times 7 is for sure a good number. So I told him to put me down for the number 48. So they said 48. 7 times 7 is 49. He said, oh, that was the mazel. A little bit of seichel, a little bit of mazel. Okay. In Yiddish, sometimes we say that somebody's success is a little bit less seichel, a little bit more mazel. Right? Not so much brains, more success. Some people, less success, more brains. Okay, in any case. Yeah.
I got 3 things on my mind. One, my mother, may she rest in peace, used to say, Mazel is the ganze Welt. So she believed.
Mazel is the whole world.
It's
Good,
the ganze Welt.
good luck. Okay, yeah.
It's everything. I've got a brother next to me, I've got 3 younger brothers, who says there is no such thing as luck. You make your way in everything.
Oh, so we're learning over here. Then maybe there's also some larger force out there.
And the third thing that's on my mind is astrology is probably good, but we haven't seen all of it. There's not
Okay,
a
so
telescope.
the way it works
They go
is,
out hundreds of years and then-
okay, so this is how astrology works. The theory, I'll tell you, the theory of astrology is that the planets closest to us, their physical proximity represent a relationship with us. If we don't see them, that means those are planets that have no relationship with us. This is the theory of astrology, which is why they only take the 7 closest and visible planets, and they say this is what we consider as the mazel of Earth, and everything else is out of our business, is out of our league. In any case, here we are seeing the second massive caveat to the Jewish understanding of astrology. Number 1, we learned. What was the first thing? It's not predicting, it's simply the inclination. It's telling you, right? It's giving you only the inclination. But number 2 is that even its predictions are so not final. They're up in the air. It could change very easily. Your mazel could change. Rabbi Akiva was supposed to be killed, so the stargazers believe they go, big deal. I'm saying, well, one little mitzvah and the whole thing goes down the drain. So the second thing is, Judaism says, a mazel ahin, mazel aher, there's a mazel saying this, the stars are saying this, but, just don't take it too seriously. The whole thing could change easily. And number 3 is this next text. This next text is going back to the story of the stargazers, the astrologers that suggested to Pharaoh about the savior of the Jewish people that's being born that day. And ultimately they got it wrong, right? They got it wrong. They told Pharaoh we could call off the campaign because the savior of the Jews is in the water. Meanwhile, he's alive and well. They got the whole thing wrong. That's the next text. Text 6, where are we holding? Julie, would you like to read? Right, Julie, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Text 6, page 61.
Astrologers chirp and do not understand what they are chirping. They mutter and they do not understand what they are muttering. Pharaoh's astrologers saw in the stars that the savior of the Jewish people would be condemned by water, so they made a decree that all male children be cast into the Nile. After Moses had been placed in the river by his mother, safely protected in a basket, the astrologers said that the Jewish savior had already been cast into the water, and Pharaoh revoked the decree. What the astrologers did not know is that the water that would condemn Moses was the episode of the waters of the Meribah.
Okay, now, if these stargazers were there to predict the future, they're doing a pretty lousy job in this story. They got it all wrong. And this is what Judaism says. Astrology, yeah, we do believe that astrology does share information. You could, but do you know how foggy, inaccurate this whole picture is? Like today, it's something called high definition and low definition, right? In the olden days, right, you can sometimes get like a low quality video file. It's very low quality, it's very blurry. You don't really see what's happening. Not a lot of detail. Imagine reading a book that like every other page is out. Or it's very blurry, like you can't really make out the words. So you're gonna, so the astrologers, they see things, they can't really, it gives you messages, you're not even sure yourself what they mean, you're starting to guess things, there's too much guesswork. Our sages say the whole thing, you could see every single time astrologers try making predictions, yeah, they're half right, they're half wrong, and the whole thing doesn't work. They saw that Moses' downfall is going to be from the water, so they thought, throw him in the Nile. Classic Egyptian thinking. What did they get wrong? It was really much later in Moses' life. God told Moses to speak to the rock. Moses hits the rock. He disobeys God's order. And God says, because of this, I'm punishing you. You're not going to go into the land of Israel. And Moses dies in the desert before the Jewish people go into Israel. That's the story. That is the downfall that the stars were speaking about. The water, which was called from Meribah. The waters of Meribah, not the waters of the Nile. So our sages say, look, just put all these factors together. Astrology doesn't predict a person, it colors the inclination. Number two, astrology can easily be overridden, overruled, revoked, amended. Easily, just a mitzvah, get God involved, the CEO comes in and all the constructs of how things work go down the drain. I'm saying, none of this. And number three, even what they do see, the whole thing is unclear. They get it all wrong. So if you had to paint this picture and put this all together, Judaism's take on position is, this is a legit reality, but from our perspective, the study of it and the knowledge of it is flawed deeply. That's the key idea. Don't rely on astrology to give you any accurate information. That is basically Judaism's take on it, which means Judaism says this is one of the systems that God put into place. There's laws of nature. We all understand there's laws of nature. All the currents of nature, of the seasons, of natural disasters, things that happen in the world, earthquakes. And this is a little bit beyond physical. It's a little bit more spiritual, that there's an energy that comes down and that affects Earth, that's important for Earth, that comes through the stars and the planets. But the study of it, our understanding of it, is so limited, and the whole field is just, it's too up in the air. It's too not final. And that is, in summary, the Jewish understanding of the astrology. So let's put this up over here. When we come to reward and punishment, prayer, mitzvos, and meritorious conduct can override any astrological destiny. That's what we learned from the story of Rabbi Akiva. And the third point, it says over here prophecy. Just ignore the word prophecy. We have the idea that astrology is inaccurate and unreliable. It's very inaccurate. You cannot rely on it. Okay. And from here, we get to the idea of the practical aspect of astrology in our lives. Should we be engaging with astrology, even if we know all the caveats about it? Right, so over here, I want to clarify. I want to make sure that we understand Judaism's position very properly. Number one, Jewish astrology is not the same at all as what we'll call widely accepted secular astrology. It's just simply a different system. Number two, even the system that Judaism does attribute validity to, Judaism says it's full of holes, it's full of gaps. Our understanding, our perception of it is so limited, is so inaccurate. Things could change. It's just not a system that's reliable. Right? When in business does something become, the chances of it not succeeding? Richard, you tell me. At what point would you say 80% chances of success? That's too low. What do the chances need to be for it to be a safe investment, a safe thing to rely on, a safe thing to throw money behind? What do you say?
Well, it depends on
the probabilities.
It depends on the cost and potential reward.
Right. There's always the risk reward.
Reward, 5%
Right.
would be good enough chance.
Right.
High cost, low reward, you need a.
So let's talk about high risk. Let's say high risk.
High risk, you would need a fairly high probability.
What would you say? What chance?
70.
70 minimum. Okay. And low risk, what would you say? You're saying it depends. If it's literally no risk, then
30%.
30%, right. You're saying it's fine. You're saying if there's not much to lose. So the question then becomes, what about our dabbling in astrology today? Next to zero. Should we do it? Should we not do it? I'll tell you something very interesting. There are people that allow astrology to really become a force in their life. Should I date this person? Should I not date this person? Let me go see what my app says. And then the app could say something very ominous, and you're walking around in a bad mood. It's an idea today. Sometimes people pin their hopes on astrology. Sometimes people they get a lot of anxiety from astrology.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, so
You read this, I shouldn't do that, so you don't do it, but
right, so, right. So right. Sometimes it's self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. That's also true. But yeah, it's an interesting. I'm saying people do so. If it's just fascinating or this or that, okay. But let's say back in the day, there really were astrologers. There are certain. This is not just hocus pocus stuff. There were some. Certain sages were known as being very big rationalists. Maimonides was known to be a very big rationalist. The Ibn Ezra was a sage, also a physician. So he was a man of science, he was a man of philosophy, and he's known as a very big rationalist. The Ibn Ezra takes astrology, the study of astrology, as very legit. As a rationalist, he says this. It's real. It's a real field of study. Today we don't really have it because I think the whole thing is kind of pseudo-astrology. But imagine a Jew living in the times of the Ibn Ezra, 800 years ago, in Spain, and there are astrologers and stargazers who could predict the future. Should you go do it? Are you allowed to go to them? Should you do it? What does Judaism say? Judaism says don't do it. Judaism says even though we do consider on a conceptual level, on a theoretical level, that the field of astrology is an actual valid field of knowledge, on the practical level, a Jew should never touch astrology. And there's two reasons for that. One is more practical, and one is a little bit more profound. And what we'll realize is, in a few minutes we're going to realize that this whole discussion we've been talking about, even though it seems like we're talking about some weird concept of astrology, it very much applies to the modern world and to the modern person in the modern world as well. It's a more mainstream idea than we think. Let's read text 10 from Nachmanides, not to be confused with Maimonides. Nachmanides, text 10, page 68, and he gets down to the bottom point. Should a Jew pursue astrology on any level? So, go ahead. Kerry, text 10. Where am I going? We skipped Susan. Susan, we're up to you. Sally, I'm sorry, Sally. Okay.
68?
Don't worry, I'm way past a 9-hour workday right now. So, text 10, page 68.
Okay. The meaning of the verse, be wholehearted with God, is that we should devote our hearts completely to God and trust that He alone controls everything. We should not inquire from astrologers or any other future tellers, nor should we trust that their predictions will be fulfilled. If we hear any predictions from them, we should assert that everything is in the hands of God, because He is omnipotent and can change the constellations of the heavens at will, negating all predictions made by astrologers. We should believe that all future occurrences are determined by our service of God.
Okay, we need to unpack this verse over here. There is a verse in the Torah. It's a commandment to the Jewish people. In Deuteronomy, it says, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Be wholehearted with God. Which means that in a Jew's life, we should devote ourselves unto God. In the words of King David, in the beautiful, poetic, and heartfelt words of King David, Hashlech al Hashem. Throw yourself onto God. It's an idea. Mentally, emotionally, throw yourself onto God. Practically speaking, what this verse tells us is, don't put your trust anywhere else. Don't put your eggs in any other basket. Wholehearted with God. God is the only force in your life. Now you can think about it. Why? There's astrology. It's legitimate. We can get information from there. And then the verse comes and says, no, but we got to be faithful to God, so don't go to astrology. Is it because God's jealous? God says, no, you're going to offend me if you go anywhere else. It's a little bit of a deeper idea. A Jew has a direct line to God. Every human being. God is the power of the universe. Starting to say, let me look at astrology. Let me get worried about astrology. Let astrology start affecting and hurting the quality of my life, is simply missing the point. It's bad business. You have a relationship with God. Astrology is anyway so you could change it. The whole thing is mutable. The whole thing is amendable. The whole thing is unclear. You're going to put your faith there and not in God? There's an interesting thing about human psychology. Judaism speaks about this a lot. People need to trust. There's no such thing as a person not having trust and not throwing their trust onto something. Which means we humans emotionally need to lean on something. And if we don't have what to lean on, we become very, very unsettled. For human comfort, we need to put our trust somewhere. So there's no such thing as a person who says, I am self-reliant, I don't need to trust anybody, I don't need to trust anything, I'm just doing good in life. It's not true. It's a lie. They're putting your trust somewhere. It could be you're putting your money, it could be you're putting your trust in money, in the stock market, in certain securities, but we all build a world of securities that become our trust. This is what I could trust on. So Judaism says, look, you're anyways trusting. It's human to trust. You know where you should put your trust? Put it on God. You know why? Because that's the one who's ultimately in control. We all know that the best people, the smartest people, the brightest people, talented people, at the end of the day, you could think you have all the chances for success. Success is in the hands of a higher power. You think this, everything could come and go. Health, money, success, nachas. We all saw that by COVID, just how unsettled we as humans, how unsettled human civilization got from the fact that all of our trusts got lost. We have nobody to trust anymore. All the things where we put our trust on just disappeared. So now we're off balance. Judaism says be wholehearted with God. Put your trust in God. Not because God is jealous that you're putting your trust somewhere else. It's just good business. It's good strategy. It's the truth. Put it on the real source of blessings. Put your trust in the place which matters. And Judaism says wherever you put your trust, if you put your trust in God, God responds. If you show God, you know what, I'm actually relying on you, God says, okay, you're relying on me, I'll take good care of you. And this is a big Jewish belief about trust. Let's read this in text 12. Also from a text that discusses astrology and Judaism, text 70, Carrie.
If we have firm faith in God regarding everything we do, we will transform the astrological destiny from bad to good.
When you trust in God, God helps you out. And the idea is nothing is beyond God's control. And therefore, ultimately, Jewish law rules like this. The bottom line in Judaism is always Jewish law, which means you could always discuss and learn the theories of Judaism and then all the discussions. Jewish law is always the bottom line. The practical application for a Jew's life is the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. And Carrie, I want you to read this text too. Text 11, going back a little bit. One text back, text 11, previous page, page 69.
We do not make inquiries from astrologers.
That's it. Jewish law says nothing more than this. We simply do not go to astrology. Think about what Rabbi Akiva did. Rabbi Akiva was the beautiful example for this. He did not go to the astrologer walks over to him. Unsolicited advice. Unsolicited tip. Rabbi Akiva hears it. Listen, the Talmud says he was nervous. What does he do about it? Does he go to his daughter and say, but just be very careful today? Does he go to his daughter and say, make sure you do a lot of mitzvahs today? Make sure you pray very hard today. Does he do anything? Nothing. You know why? He says, look, a wedding is a mitzvah. If I even say a peep, I'm ruining the simcha. Now people can be worried. No one could dance properly. It's just, you got it all wrong. Don't allow unimportant things to distract the important thing. We're doing a mitzvah. We're doing what matters. God is in control. It's all fine. If he would tell his daughter, don't get married today, that would be violating a mitzvah. That would be anti-Jewish. That would be anti being wholehearted with God. So he says, get married. And what do we see indeed happens? The astrological predictions didn't happen. Because a little mitzvah gets in the way. It brings a merit. It brings goodness to your life. There's one final point I want to add over here, which is like this. We humans have a problem that whenever we see a force in life, we make it into an idol. I once heard the Rebbe say that money in America is our golden calf. Every civilization had an idol. That this is the force that rules our life. That's what an idol is. A higher force that is now going to literally change my life. I'm going to make decisions based on this force or this perceived force. For some people, it's science. And then it becomes that this force is a secondary God. I believe in God, but God, I have news for you. I have another higher power that is in competition with you. So the moment the Jew says, you know, God, I know I gotta do this mitzvah, but if I do this, I'm not gonna be able to make the money that I need to do. You know what you're essentially saying? I've got two gods. I've got more than one God. I've got one God who I worship, and I have another God who I worship. I have two gods who are dictating my choices I make in life. And astrology could easily become that. What's my mazel? What's the future? You start changing plans based on astrology. The moment you are allowing astrology to be an active force that dictates your life, you have just crossed that line into believing in astrology to worshiping astrology. In the olden days, this was worship. They saw and they understood, and Judaism actually validates this, that there's a certain flow of energy that comes from the sun, from the moon, from the stars, from the planets. And the earliest generations of civilization start saying there's a one God, creator, and then there's smaller gods. And we're going to start worshiping also smaller gods. The ultimate Jewish message of this class is, while there are many forces, we can never forget that these are not forces independent from God. God created the world. The way God chose to interact with the world is to be behind the scenes, incognito. Little kids look at a puppet show and all you see is a puppet show. Elmo's alive. And every adult understands that as much as you sing in front of the stage, there's a whole behind the scenes team that is really making this happen. Everything that's happening is really a force behind the scenes making it happen. And that's how God makes the universe. God made his laws of nature. God made the way things work, the powers that control reality. And the idolatrous mistake, the pagan worldview is to look at forces in nature and say, that is a force to reckon with. The Jewish belief is, it's a force. There's a God in the world. There's a force of nature, there's laws of nature. Who do you think made those laws? Who do you think is activating those laws? Who do you think is really the hand inside the glove? Who's the hand in the puppet? It's God. So if you look at astrology and say, ooh, I have a God, and then I get information from astrology as a separate independent thing, that is literally crossing the red line on a certain conceptual level of paganism. And that's why Judaism says, you got to be very, very careful when you dabble with astrology. It is true. In a certain way, it's a law of nature. Certain energies pass through the planets. But don't you dare think that this is a force to reckon with. There's only one force. Be wholehearted with God. Let's conclude with two texts. All right? Text 13. This is a letter that somebody wrote to the Rebbe, to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Last week we read 2 letters from the Rebbe about dreams. We'll read a letter this week about astrology. Somebody asked the Rebbe, is astrology legit? And he had a fascination with astrology. And it seems like this is a young person. Like a young man wrote to the Rebbe about this, and the Rebbe says something so fascinating here. The Rebbe adds an interesting thing. Let's read text 13, page 71. And Larry, we're up to you.
I duly received your letter in which you ask about the Jewish attitude to horoscopes, etc. Generally, astrology and the like play no part in Jewish life, as it is also written in the Holy Scriptures. Of the signs in heaven you shall have no fear. On the contrary, we have the commandment, thou shalt be wholehearted with God, your God, which is also quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. This means that the Jew has to have complete and wholehearted faith in God and in his benevolent providence, which extends to each and every one individually. As for taking an interest in horoscope, etc., purely as a curiosity and the like, as you mentioned, this would amount to a waste of interest which should be challenged in a more productive way, for it is explained in Hasidus that God has not given man an excess of capacities, nor deficiencies of it. In other words, every person, and especially a Jew, has been given a certain amount of capacities and powers of concentrations, etc., all of which must be utilized in the fulfillment of his purpose in life on this earth, namely to live in accordance with the Torah and mitzvot, and to disseminate justice and righteousness, etc. It follows from the above that if a person should divert any of his capacities, thoughts, and concentrations on a useless thing, even if it be harmless, it is nevertheless harmful in the sense that he would thereby create a deficiency in the area which is important and necessary for him.
So this is very, very Lubavitcher Rebbe-esque. Typical Rebbe. So for number one, he answers the question. One of the Jewish attitudes, exactly like we learned. A Jew doesn't place any trust, any faith in astrology. Like Jeremiah says, of the signs in the heaven, he shall have no fear. We're wholehearted with God. God is the force in our life. God takes good care of us. And then there have been very typical fashion, goes and says, you're a young man. You've got talent, you've got resources, you've got time. You could change the world. There's work for you to do. What are you busy investing your time and energy in nonsense? That was there, always pushing people. What could you do? What could you do for society? What could you do for the Jewish people? Every single person has what to do. Every single person is a gift to the world. Act upon it. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your resources. And this is the Jewish attitude. There's a beautiful midrash that Abraham tells God. It's hinted to in the verses of the Torah, and the midrash, our sages, unpack the story. Abraham turns to God and says, God, you're promising me a child. I've seen in the stars, I've seen in my mazel that I'm not destined to have a child. And God tells him, what are you paying attention to the astrology for? You think because you saw Jupiter in the east, I think that's the words of the midrash. It's earlier on in the book. You saw Jupiter in the east, so you think you can't have a child? I'll move Jupiter to the west, and you'll have a child. This is a force to reckon with. If you need a blessing, you'll get the blessing. This is not like the CEO. Yeah, there's things in place. Who do you think made all the rules? And one last text, which I think is the clincher for tonight, that really brings this whole conversation back home. In a certain way, there has been a resurgence in this issue within Judaism. It's not astrology anymore, but within the world of science and genetics and psychology, it's coming back a little bit. And we need to remind ourselves the Jewish perspective. Let's read text 14 in conclusion. From Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, page 72, Toby. Bring it home for us.
Free will is one of the fundamental beliefs of Judaism. Maimonides explains why. If we had no free will, there would be, he says, no point to the commands and prohibitions, since we would behave as we were predestined to, regardless of what the law is, nor would there be any justice in reward or punishment, since neither the righteous nor the wrongdoer is free to be other than what they are. So the problem is an ancient one, but it has become much more salient in modern times because of the sheer accumulation of challenges to the belief in human freedom. Marx said history is formed by the play of economic forces. Freud argued that we are what we are because of unconscious drives. Neo-Darwinism,
Darwinians.
say that however we rationalize our behavior, we do what we do because people who behaved this way in the past survived to hand on their genes to future generations. Most recently, neuroscientists have shown that fMRI scans that in some cases our brain registers a decision up to 7 seconds before we are consciously aware of it.
So the same exact problem that Judaism had with astrology 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, interestingly, are still issues that we need to fight for, these beliefs. It's still popping up today, not in the form of astrology, but it's the same exact principles. We have free choice. Stop putting our eggs in the wrong baskets. Stop putting our trust in the wrong places. We have free choice. God, we are accountable to God. God rewards us, and God is in control of our lives. Now, as we conclude, I just want to add a nugget here which is going to throw a big wrench into this whole, a monkey wrench into this whole class. And this could be a topic for another class. In this class, I have oversimplified the Jewish take on astrology. I have told you that Judaism says astrology is legit. There's one person who shatters that whole narrative. The great Maimonides, none other than Maimonides, no less than Maimonides, shows up and says astrology is one big bogus baloney. It's fake. It's fake. It's not real. And you find sources in Judaism that seem to give credibility to astrology. You're not understanding it properly. That's what Maimonides says. So first of all, on a personal level, on a level of your own personal bias, if you are somebody who's has a very hard time swallowing the idea of astrology, okay, you should know that you have Maimonides to hold on to. But on the other hand, it just shows you how any topic in Judaism actually becomes a lot more nuanced than you think it is. And we had that, but Maimonides has a lot of explaining to do because Judaism seems to give a lot of credibility to astrology. So that would be a whole nother class to understand Judaism's position. But that would already be a very advanced class. But for now, I just wanted to throw that in over there. So just like that, we see all the different takes. And with that, dear friend, we conclude tonight's class. Next week, lesson 3, jinxes, blessings, curses, the evil eye. If you want to know why Jews say Kenai and Hara, next week. And I want to thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful night. May God bless you all. Enjoy the wonderful weather.